Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to start looking at forms in the context of servlets and JSPs. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the HTML side of creating forms. If you want a good tutorial on HTML, there's lots and lots on the internet. But here we're going to kind of rush through the HTML and look at kind of how you handle the form data using JSPs and servlets. And we're going to look at the basic concepts behind forms as well. So I've created a new project here called Forms, a new dynamic web project, and I've added a servlet called Controller in a controller package. And in web content, I'm going to create a new JSP. And I'm going to call it, let's call it form1.jsp, that will do. So here's my form page. Let's just run this and check that everything's working correctly. Yeah, so looks good to me. Okay, so I'm going to create a simple HTML form on this page. And of course, forms are the things that you use for letting users log in or for collecting details of any kind from them. And you can have like text areas and checkboxes and radio buttons on forms, which you create using the HTML. But here we're just going to look at some really simple examples using like text fields and buttons. So we need to use the form HTML tag like this, and a form has an action, and we're going to look at that in a minute. But firstly, I'm going to just define a field on this form. Let's have a field, an input control of type text, and I've got to set the name for it, but because this controls the parameter which the form data will have. It's the name of the parameter when it's submitted. So I'm going to call this. Let's call this user. So this can be a form that collects a username, and I could give it a value which would control the initial text that appears in the text field, but I won't do that here. So just the type and the name is enough here, I think. And let's also put a button in there. So I'll say input type equals submit. So this is a submit button that the user clicks to submit the form data. And I'll give that probably the name here doesn't really matter, but I should give it a value because that controls what appears on the button. So let's enter OK. That'll just do. I could call that register or something like that. Now the action is this controls what the form, what URL it goes to when the data is submitted. And I want my form to go to submit to my controller Java because the controller here is going to check the form data, and then it's going to ultimately go to another JSP. So let's just click on this. Let's just run it to make sure I get the URL right here. So I need this bit of the URL. So in action, I'm going to paste this, and notice I didn't copy the domain name. I've copied the web context and the actual end bit of the URL, whatever the technical name for that is. But I'm not copying the domain name because this is relative. Since I'm starting with a slash, this is going to be relative to the domain name, and my domain name is obviously going to change when I upload my web application. It's not going to be localhost 8280 when it's on the internet, so I want to leave that out of the form action there. And I'm going to set a couple more things on in the form tag here. I'm going to say method equals get, which is actually the default anyway, and we'll see what that does shortly. And I think that's it actually. So I've set the action, I've set the method. Actually, that's probably all I need here. Yeah, that will do. Now let's see what that does. So if I run this now, that HTML has just created this really simple form. It could be a little login control or something, although usually you'd have a password, of course. And if I type my name in here and just click OK, then it submits. It goes to this URL with the controller servlet, because that's the action of my form. And it's because I said that the method here, that method is get, which is the default. The parameters actually appear in the URL, and we're going to look in the next tutorial how I can change that. But basically, the result of submitting that form is to go to this specified URL, the one that I specified in action, and any parameters, any text fields or other controls, other input controls on the form, basically will add parameters after the URL like this. And now in my controller.java, I'm just going to do something really simple here. Because I'm using the get action, the get method in my form, that will invoke the doGet method of my servlet here. And I'm just going to say here, print writer out equals response dot get writer. There we go, response dot get writer. And let's add the input there, Control-Shift-O in Eclipse, and I'll say out.write, and let's just have an HTML tag. So I'll just output some HTML directly from my servlet, just for a minute, just to get us started. And I'll have a closing HTML tag. So let's close that HTML tag, and then let's just, here I'm going to say string user equals request, which is request. The request object, of course, has to do things that are submitted by the browser to this servlet, which includes the parameters, request.getParameter, whereas response is stuff that you send back, which is why I do response.getWriter. And then I'm going to say request.getParameter user, and the reason it's called user is because on my form here I called this input type, the text control, here I called it user. So hence it's going to be the user parameter. And let's just echo that back here. Let's just say out.write user and plus user. Save that, and now I'll go back to my form. I'll run my form. So I'm restarting the web application here by clicking run. And if I click OK without entering anything, it's just going to be blank. So it's not in fact null. It's just like empty. It's just like an empty string. But if I go back with the back button there and type something in there and click OK, we'll just hit return actually, then we can see that my servlet has got the user parameter and it's echoing it back. So that's the absolute basics of forms, and we're going to enlarge on that in the subsequent tutorials, the next tutorials. So join me again next time, and until next time, happy coding.